Alright, and this is what the finished product looks like, alright? So as you can see, I put this down on the ground. It's very, very sturdy. And what I did was I tied up a loose slag one and then a tight one. So in case the plant does fall or anything happens to this, it still has this for support so that it doesn't break or drop or anything like that. And that's until the roots establish pretty well on the pot. And you know, I don't have to worry about that. Either way, you always will have to, because the plant is top heavy. You get what I'm saying? This is actually a very tall papaya tree. And you know, I mean, they stop growing once they're in a pot. They can only grow so long. I did cut some of the roots in the pot before I planted it, so that you know, it helps it take in more nutrients. But it looks very healthy. I did that with this one before I put it in here, and it appears to be doing absolutely great. I mean, it looks beautiful. This one I pruned when it was just one stem. I pruned it from here, and then this became the new leader. Then it's got another little runner on the side, and that's it. Just a 2-stem root system on that one. But yeah, I mean, like I said, if you look at the roots on this, they're exposed. This is basically how they like it. Now let me cover in this video why the yellow the yellow leaves happen. These plants love water, but they don't like to be they don't like to have wet feet. That's number one. Number two, the roots on these are actually pretty sensitive. They're very thick, and one of the things they don't like is when there's too much heat in the pot. That actually causes the yellowing of the lower leaves. So if you have your pot somewhere where it's shaded to some extent, as you can see, the sun basically comes in this way. I've got my seating area here. It's basically just getting some sunlight on top, but it really doesn't heat up the pot in such an aggressive way. And aside from that, it's a lighter colored pot, like the pot I have here. This is a light colored pot. Okay, when they're in dark pots like this, that's when you'll start to notice you have a little bit more of the lowering yellow leaves. You'll notice that if you grow these directly in the ground and not in pots, that you don't really have that issue with lower yellowing leaves. The reason you'll have that is with these is because of that reason. Now, this is the main reason that I found out this year, because I made a video on the lower yellowing leaves, and I'm going to link that in the description of this video. But this is another reason that I found this year why that happens, is because for one, they love water. They love the water, but they don't like to be they don't like to have wet feet. They don't like to be waterlogged. So there's not supposed to be like a puddle on the ground or anything like that, and you know, that causes root rotting and whatnot, and that actually causes lower yellowing leaves. But aside from that is the way you water as well. So these plants are very heavy feeders. I've got a lot of compost in here. One of the things that's important is that if you can have this set up in a way, because they can go a period of time without being watered. As you'll notice, this is actually really dry. This is dry. Okay, this is actually very, very dry. Look how dry this is. You can actually see that this crumbles up. But the soil here, some people say, like, you know, when you dig 2 inches, you know, this is basically still dry there. And the plant doesn't look like it's got wilting leaves or anything like that. Now, if you leave them like that, don't forget these plants hold a lot of water in the stem and in the trunk and in the leaves. They hold a lot of water. And they actually, if it's a humid environment, they like to actually absorb the water from the air as well. But when you're putting a lot of water down here, the reason I say the way you water is, let's say if I have a hose and I start to water the plant like that, this actually starts to bring down a lot of the nutrients off the roots. Now, the main water that I noticed this never happens with is with rainwater. When this gets rained on, you'll notice that it doesn't matter how much water falls in there, you'll never have any lowering yellow leaves. There's something in that kind of water which has basically got, I don't know, it's like living electrical water to some extent. The water that comes out of the hose is garbage. It's basically you know, chlorine, fluoridated water. And these papaya trees, you'll notice that when you water them too much with that, they start to actually have lower yellowing leaves. These plants, you could kind of treat them like cactuses. They don't need to be, they like water, but they don't need to be watered by you. You get what I'm saying? Like they can actually go when it rains, and even if it rains a lot or it goes through a period of drought, you can let it go through that period of drought. You won't have any lower yellowing leaves. I haven't watered this plant in quite a bit, and we haven't had any rain. And yeah, it's a little bit cooler now. We're in kind of like the fall season, but I noticed that in the summer, I didn't go too much. I didn't have to go through the trouble too much of having to water the plant. Like you could, I mean, if you're a gardener, you can pretty much make wise decisions on what you should be doing, and you kind of get to know your plant to some extent. But one of the things I could tell you is that when you overwater your plant, like your papaya trees, because this is dry. Look, this is absolutely dry. I can go as deep. It's dry, and the thing is like I said, I've noticed that this whole winter that I really just didn't water it as much, and I did that as an experiment, and I noticed some significant changes. Now, one of the things that does cause lower yellowing leaves is that when the pot gets really hot and you water it, that actually causes lower yellowing leaves, okay? Because now you're creating a very hot, humid, moist condition under there that it doesn't like. These plants like actually cool, moist soil, not hot, humid, wet soil under there. You get what I'm saying? That's going to cause a lot of lower yellowing leaves as well. So keep the pot cool. Put it in a space where it's not, because like I said, if it's growing in the soil, you won't see that. But if it's growing in a pot, keep the pot cool and in a position where it's not going to get too hot from the sun. Just make it where it's nice and shaded to some extent. If you notice here, I've got these ornamental potatoes growing here. I'm going to tell you one thing that I did notice. This is just one potato. And look at what's crazy is that they grow multiple tubers under there, and this tends to spread everywhere. Now, these aren't the type of plants that feed off other plants. They just grow everywhere. And if you'll notice, this is actually one of my citrus trees. This tree outgrew all my other citrus trees because of this effect that's happening. So these ornamental sweet potatoes actually covered the pot completely, and all it did was just float over it. And what I'm going to do next year is I'm going to have this basically overflow most of my papaya trees, and I'm going to do that as an experiment to see if I see any significant changes there. So in the fall, now I'm conditioning the soil, cleaning out the roots and whatnot. You know, by springtime they'll be prepped. But what I want to do is I want to have something like this. I'm going to buy more of these, or actually I don't even have to buy anything. I could just take one of these stems and throw it in water, and it'll just grow new plants. Like, I'm going to take a few of them and I'm going to plant them in different areas, and I'm going to surround my papaya trees with them, and I want them to overflow the pots of my papaya trees. And then what that's going to do is it's going to keep the papaya tree pot real cool and moist under there, and then it's going to receive the full sun up above. So it needs that real hot condition above, because they like full sun, they like really hot temperatures, but the soil needs to be moist. So that's something that I noticed. You know, when it's hot and you have your papaya trees in a pot, don't assume that you have to water it or needs water. You will experience lower yellowing leaves. It's because of the hot, moist conditions you're creating in the soil, and you're also washing out a lot of the nutrients from the roots that it has. And then also I'm going to tie in the other video where it basically kind of mimics and talks about almost the same thing, where I had my pot here in a dark container. The sun is basically at its highest point here, and it was caking up the roots. And what I noticed is that I kept watering it and watering it. And what that did was create lower yellowing leaves. So that is one huge tip there that I wish I knew when I started to grow these, because I was looking online all over the place to basically try to figure out what was causing the lower yellowing leaves. And come to find out that a lot of the information I got was coming down to, oh, your plant has some kind of virus, and your plant has some kind of fungal disease or whatnot. And then what happens is that you end up killing your tree, because you'll start to treat this condition as if it was a disease, but it's not necessarily a disease. You start to get all these chemicals and start to treat your plant a certain way, and all you have to do is sometimes something as simple as either moving it to a lighter pot, or moving the pot to a space where it's not abusing the roots so much in such a hot condition in the middle of the summer. And like I said, your watering habits, which are very important. Make sure that you see over here, let me show you. I transplanted this one. I did the video just before. you know, I cleaned out the roots, but what I did was I've now added some compost in there because I don't fertilize. I just added compost, and I planted the plant really high above the soil line over here. As you can see, make sure that you have your base, some of the little roots up here exposed. I made the mistake of planting it too high above the trunk, and it rotted the trunk out, and it actually ended up killing my tree. So as you can see, look where the roots are at, and look at where the base of this pot is. So you can see how high above the how high above the pot line it is. You see that? And what it is that the soil is coming in this way. I add all these wood chips in here, and then I watered it, which I just showed you in the video before if you want to look at it. A lot of people would think that all the soil is going to just drip out. It's going to come out, but it didn't. It created a very cool effect where, since I put these on top, once I watered it, it compacted on top of the soil, where to the point where I even put the hose right here to see if any of the soil came out. None of the soil came out. What it did was it kept all the soil in place. So things like this are very good because it doesn't keep your plant waterlogged. And I put some sticks inside the pot. Just watch my previous video. I'll show you everything that's in there. And then what I did was I added the soil mixed with compost and peat moss. Make sure the soil is nice and loose, and you know, it's a very good structured soil with nutrients. I don't fertilize. I just use organic compost. My compost bins are back there, and I got a plethora of compost. And then back there, as you can see, I'm building my greenhouse there for the winter time. But as you can see back there you'll see I've got a big pile of mulch, and then in front of my property I've also got another huge pile of mulch back there. As you can, in front of the house, you see that? Now, as you can see, everything here is mulched up. Everything, all my plants are mulched up. Everything is pretty much covered with a nice thick layer of mulch. And I like to plant above the base of the plant. Like a lot of people usually plant their stuff, and at the base, what I do is I plant it real high above the base. The roots on this are technically starting here, and look how much space I got here. All that in there is soil. I cover that on top with wood chips, and you'll never see soil come out of the pot. That's a good practice because, again, it gives the roots some space to grow into the pot, and you can actually make the most of the room that you have in your pots. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's another important thing. If you don't have big enough pots, you can make it where you can make it work. Like this one, actually, I feel needs a much bigger pot. You know, look how thick that trunk is. But I made it where I added another maybe a couple gallons of size just by doing that. So yeah, I hope this video helps. That's about all I got for now. The previous video shows you what the root system of that papaya tree looks like. If you see that it's got a smaller canopy, I took out I do a pruning so that it gives a chance for the new growth to come in and kind of cut, because it had a big canopy. But aside from that, for me to move that plant and get it out of the pot and rest it somewhere, I had to take out some of the leaves, because if not, I mean, it would have just broke anyway, because it was a huge canopy. So it made it easier for me to actually move the plant around. So what I did was I took the pot, I cleared out those lower leaves, which I got over here, see? And then what I did was, now it's got more room to grow, and for that that crown right there to just spread out and actually build a big canopy. But that, and it also makes it, because this is very top heavy, you know what I'm saying? And when it's that top heavy, that's why I put this over here to hold it in place until that establishes itself. I've already done this before. Once that happens, I don't have to worry about that. Plus, I put this plant in a space where it's surrounded by other plants and it doesn't have the ability to tip over. You know what I'm saying? So I've noticed this whole entire summer we've had some pretty heavy storms, and it's still kept everything in place. So yeah, that's all I got for now. We'll talk soon.